Okay, thank you for joining tonight. Tonight we're going to look at Hugh Ross's latest book called Design to the Core. And then we're going to watch a video of him. But before we do that, I want to just do a very short review of what the anthropic principle is, because he talks a lot about that. So we know that over the last 100 years, many scientists have discovered that for life to exist, you need various conditions to be met just for to have a planet that's able to support life. The universe has to be fine-tuned, and this fine-tuning is called the anthropic principle. And one of the first people that this talked about this was Fred Hoyle. He realized that in order to have life, you need carbon and oxygen and nitrogen. And in order to produce those in the right levels, you need to have a certain sequence of events going where helium combined with beryllium and another helium and a carbon that produce oxygen. Produce carbon. And there's a similar process for oxygen. And he discovered that this only happens because there's certain energy levels within the atoms. If those energy levels were changed slightly, this process wouldn't work and you wouldn't be able to get carbon. So then you wouldn't have life. Robert Dicke in 1961 found out that life only can exist in a certain period of the universe's history, because you need to have enough time for the elements to be formed, and they're only formed in supernovas. And so you need to have at least 7 billion years for those to be produced. Brandon Carter in 73 proposed that humanity lives at the just right time and location with just the right physical constants. And he was the first one to actually use the phrase anthropic principles. And then John Barrow and Frank Tipler said that all the universe's physical and cosmological constants must assume precise values so that we can exist. And some of these precise values that need to be correct is the mass of the universe. It needs to be just right. If it's too much, then the universe, there's gravity too strong, the universe does not expand properly, and all you get are black holes. If it's too little, it expands too fast, and all you get is hydrogen everywhere. And then the rate of expansion has to be a certain value. And you need to have the right strength between the 4 different forces that exist: strong force, electromagnetic, weak force, and gravitational force. And you need to have the right mass of relative mass of protons and electrons. And you need to have an equal number of them in the whole universe. You need to have the right galaxy. And only a spiral galaxy can support life, and about 5% are spiral. And we're going to see in the video later, there's a few more conditions regarding galaxies. You need just the right galaxy so you have enough supernova explosions to produce all the elements. You need to have what are called white dwarf binaries, because that's the only place in the universe where you can produce fluorine. The planet with life has to be a certain distance from the center of the galaxy. It can't be too far away or too close. You need to have a solar system that only has one star in the center. Some are binary, and a binary star will prevent the orbit of a planet from being stable. You need a star that's not too hot and not too cold. You need to be have an orbit where it's almost a circle. This is you need to have planets also the size of Jupiter and Saturn in the solar system, because they reduce the number of asteroids that hit planets in the system. You need to have a moon, because the moon keeps the tilt of the Earth stable so that your climate is stable. You need to have the planet just the right distance from the star. If you're too close, it's too hot. If you're too far, it's too cold. The orbit of the planet around the sun has to be almost a circle. Mars, for example, is more stretched out, and that causes huge variations in the temperature on Mars. You need the right rotation period. You need to have a magnetic field to protect us from the radiation from the sun. And we're going to skip the rest here. And so basically, as time goes on, more and more of these factors were discovered. And as of 2008, there was 816. And so the probability that we are here is almost nothing. And this number of 10 to this exponent here of 1,000, it can never happen because the total number of atoms in the entire universe is only 10 to the 80. So this gives you an idea of some of the factors, but let's watch and see what Hugh Ross tells us in this presentation that he's going to do.
Is about my latest book. I've now put out 22 books, and this is the 5th book that I have written on the fine-tuning argument. Let me see if I can do this again. Let me try this. Oh boy, okay.
Let's skip this part here.
Tuning argument for God. Traditionally, that's been the go-to scientific argument for the existence of God. It goes all the way back to the early church fathers. But what I want to share with you is how we can develop an exponentially stronger fine-tuning argument for God. And it's based on the biblical principle that God began his works of redemption before he created anything at all. And yes, I think we're working well there. That it tells us in 2 Timothy 1:9 that the grace that was given us in Christ Jesus before the beginning of time. And in Titus 1:2, the hope of eternal life, which God, who does not lie, promised before the beginning of time. This is just 2 of 7 texts in the Bible that tells us, number 1, that time has a beginning. I spoke yesterday at a conference basically laying out the evidence that we now have that time indeed was created. The space-time theorems prove that there's a beginning to space and time. And of all the holy books that undergird the religions of the world, the Bible stands alone in saying, not only does the universe have a beginning, time is a beginning, space is a beginning. But what the Bible tells us is that God began his works of redemption before he created anything at all. The grace that we receive, the hope that we get, was actually put into effect before the beginning of time. In other words, before the triune God created anything at all, they worked out their plan of how they were going to bring billions of human beings into a redemptive relationship where they would be delivered from their sin and evil and enter into an eternal relationship, loving relationship with the Creator himself. What this implies scientifically, if indeed God began his works of redemption before he created anything, it implies that everything that God creates is for the purpose of redemption. Now, what I've seen amongst my peers in astronomy and physics, they will observe the universe and its characteristics, and they discover that many of those characteristics must be fine-tuned to make life possible. And the fine-tuning is even more spectacular if you want the equivalent of human beings to exist in the universe. But I don't know of any work until this design for the core book that actually puts it in a redemptive context. What does the fine-tuning need to be like for billions of human beings to redeem from their sin and evil? So what I've done in the book Design of the Core is say, well, let's look at the universe of all different size scales, from the universe as a whole, all the way down to the objects that are right close up to us, the comets, the asteroids, the moon, the earth, the sun, the interior structures of all these objects, and test to see whether or not this is really designed with redemption in mind. And that's exactly what I've been able to demonstrate. Spent 3 years going through the scientific literature, and indeed we see that the fine-tuning argument for God increases exponentially when we put it in the context of what's needed to make possible the redemption of billions of humans from their sin and evil in a short period of time. Now, the opening chapter, I talk about the universe, how we need a just right universe. And this is something that's been written about in many books. I've got over 50 books in my library, written mainly by people who are not believers. How when we look at the universe, we see overwhelming evidence that has been highly fine-tuned to make possible the existence of life and human beings in particular. But what I've added is how much the universe has to be designed or to make the redemption of human beings possible. In particular, we discover that each of the laws of physics, gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and weak nuclear force, the size of the universe, the age of the universe, the mass of the universe, all that must be exquisitely fine-tuned in order to make redemption possible. The laws of physics themselves are chosen by God as a tool to bring about the redemption of humanity. We need gravity. We need thermodynamics. Jesus himself said, in this world you'll have tribulation, but take heart, I've overcome the world. Tribulation, that's an inevitable consequence of gravity, electromagnetism, thermodynamics, and a strong and weak nuclear force. We'll have that in this universe. But what we see in the Bible is it's a two creation model. God will use this universe as a tool to eradicate evil and suffering once and for all. And then he'll take us into a new creation. What we see in Revelation 21 and 22, in the new creation, there is no death, there is no decay. We have a building in the new creation that defies the law of gravity. There will be no gravity. There will be no electromagnetic radiation. There will be light. Everything will glow with light, but there'll be no darkness. There'll be no shadows. We're going to be introduced to radically different laws of physics because we no longer need the laws of physics we see or the universe in which we live because evil and suffering will no longer exist. But what we'll also see is we have to be in a just right super galaxy cluster. And only in the last few years have we astronomers even been able to define what a super galaxy cluster is. It's a cluster of clusters of galaxies. But only recently we've been able to discern the structure and the boundaries of these super galaxy clusters. I'll show you a few images in a minute. And we have to be living in a just right galaxy, and a just right galaxy cluster, and a just right galaxy group. And we need to be living in a just right galaxy. Life is only possible in a spiral galaxy. Other galaxies, the stars are jammed way too tightly together in order for stable orbits of planets to go around stars and for those planets to be protected from radiation. Now, we astronomers have been looking throughout the entire universe, trying to find a galaxy sufficiently like our Milky Way galaxy that it could be a candidate for advanced life. Those of you who are Star Wars fans, I want to disappoint you. There is no galaxy far, far away. We look far, far away. We don't see any. But what I've done in the book is to show you the 18 galaxies that come the closest to matching our Milky Way galaxy in its capacity to support life. I'll show you 11 of them this morning. And so what we see here, let me move it up. Go, maybe. Here we go. The upper left one you might recognize, that's what's called our sister galaxy. It's the Andromeda galaxy. However, when you look carefully at that image, you notice that the spiral arms are distorted. The outer spiral arms are as big as the inner spiral arms, and it also has a very active and has a very large supermassive black hole in its core. And these other spiral galaxies, you'll notice that the spiral arms are distorted, and there's lots of spurs and feathers between the spiral arms. Here's some galaxies that come even closer. In fact, the one that you see in the center upper, that's the galaxy that comes the closest to matching our Milky Way galaxy. But it has a supermassive black hole in its core that is actively pulling in matter, and it basically is radiating the entire galaxy with dangerous radiation. And also you can see that the spiral arms are distorted. The Milky Way galaxy is in the bottom right. You can see how symmetrical the spiral arms are, how few feathers and spurs exist between the spiral arms. And unlike these other spiral galaxies, it's got a quiet nucleus. It's not pouring out deadly radiation. And we not only need a just right galaxy, we need a just right star. And so let me move this along. And what we're noticing as we go from the super galaxy cluster to our galaxy cluster, our galaxy group, our galaxy, our star, our planet, our moon, in each case, as we survey the entirety of the universe, we're not finding anything that's anywhere like it. Each case, our star is unique. It's unique in the sense that for 70 years, astronomers have been scouring our Milky Way galaxy, looking at tens of millions of stars, doing the same thing in the Andromeda galaxy and the large and small Magellanic Clouds, searching intently to find a star that's sufficiently like the sun that it could be a candidate to have a planet orbiting it on which advanced life is possible. We have found many stars that are twins of one another, but we've yet to find a star that's equal to the sun. It's the only star we found that's a candidate to have advanced life orbiting it. And it was back in 1995 that astronomers discovered planets orbiting other stars. And they were excited and saying, we're going to find hundreds of planets that are just like the planets in our solar system. Well, here we are in 2022. The number of discovered and measured planets now stands above 5,000. And of those 5,000, not a single one looks anything like any of the planets in our solar system. Not only have we not been able to find a twin of planet Earth, we've not been able to find a twin of Mercury, of Venus, of Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, or Uranus, and Neptune. And this led to a discovery that each of the planets in our solar system must be exquisitely fine-tuned to make advanced life possible on planet Earth. Mercury must be exactly the way it is. Venus must be exactly the way it is. Mars and all the rest of the planets must be precisely the characteristics that they possess in order for advanced life to be possible here on planet Earth. So come Thanksgiving next month, I want you not only to thank God for our amazing planet Earth, but please thank God also for Mercury and Venus and Mars, Uranus, Neptune, because without those planets being precisely the way they are, there'd be no possibility for you to have Thanksgiving dinner on your table. And it's not just that the 8 planets in our solar system all must be exquisitely fine-tuned. This is even true of the asteroid and comet belts that we see in our solar system. We have 5 of these asteroid and comet belts, and now we've got the technology to discover asteroid and comet belts around other stars. And what we discover is 80% of the stars we look at do not have any asteroids or comets at all. And we now know why. They're gas giant planets migrate so far inward towards a host star, they basically eradicate or erase or scatter out all the asteroids and comets. And then the other 20%, their gas giant planets don't migrate at all. And consequently, they have asteroid and comet belts 1,000 times bigger than we see in our solar system. And if you got 1,000 times as many asteroids and comets, that means we're going to get regular bombardments of our planet by these comets and asteroids. And that would make civilization rather unpleasant to have these things crashing into the Earth all the time. One wiped out the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. So you don't want that happening every day. On the other hand, you don't want any delivery at all, because our planet has a mass where the gravity is strong enough to retain carbon dioxide, strong enough to retain oxygen, but it's barely strong enough to retain water. And so we actually lose a tiny amount of water to interplanetary space every day. But that tiny amount of water that we lose is replaced by the water we gain from comets. About 10,000 tiny comets bombard our Earth every day, and comets are 85% frozen water. So we get a delivery of water that replaces the water that we lose. And moreover, we get the occasional asteroid crashing into the Earth. And many of these asteroids are super endowed with heavy elements. So for example, 80% of the gold and platinum that's in circulation today comes from an asteroid that crashed just outside of Johannesburg, South Africa. 50% of the nickel in circulation today comes from an asteroid that crashed on the north shore of Lake Huron near Sudbury, Ontario. So we're blessed by having just the right delivery of asteroids and comets to planet Earth. And of course, we need a just right Earth. Over 400 characteristics of the Earth must be fine-tuned to make advanced life possible. And we have a just right moon. And now we know that 23 distinct characteristics of the moon must be fine-tuned. So one example is our planet Earth has a stable rotation axis tilt. It moves between 22 and about 24 and a half degrees back and forth over a 41,000 year period. That's possible because we have a small planet being orbited by a gigantic moon. That's what stabilizes the rotation axis. So all the rest of the planets in our solar system, the rotation axis does this, flips back and forth. And so we have the stable rotation axis. That's just one of the features we gained from the moon. Now, I mentioned earlier that we just gained the technology to define super galaxy clusters. And I want to show you a slide of the map of the super galaxy cluster in which we live. Let me see if I can advance it. There you go. That's the Laniakea super galaxy cluster. It's a cluster of clusters of galaxies. But what's unique about our Laniakea super galaxy cluster is the galaxy clusters and galaxy groups are sprung out along these long filaments. And so that little red dot there basically shows where our local group of galaxies exists. It's at the nexus of 3 subfilaments. If you're not near a filament or a subfilament, there won't be enough tiny dwarf galaxies there to sustain the spiral structure. But notice that we're in a grouping of galaxies that's in the least dense part of the Laniakea super galaxy cluster. And we're living in the smallest galaxy group of all the galaxy groups that exist. And notice that the big clusters of galaxies are all tilted way over to the right. The Virgo cluster, the Centaurus cluster, the Hydra cluster, those are clusters where you got so many galaxies jammed so tightly together that many of those galaxies have really huge supermassive black holes that basically radiate not the entire galaxy with deadly radiation, but even all the galaxies in its vicinity. Fortunately, we're 53 million light years away from the nearest one of those nasty supermassive black holes, far enough away that it doesn't disturb our civilization. Now, we astronomers have found tens of thousands of these super galaxy clusters in the universe, but this is the only one. where we see the galaxies and galaxy groups sprung out along these long filaments. It's the only one where the galaxy groups are relatively small, and even the galaxy clusters are not that big. Let me show you a typical super galaxy cluster. This is the Shapley super galaxy cluster. And here you see, you've got these big clusters of galaxies jammed so tightly together that you really don't have any voids. You really can't see any filaments there. And it's filled, because of the density of galaxies, it's filled with these supermassive black holes that radiate deadly radiation. And the galaxies are so close together, they're gravitationally disturbing one another. And this is typical of super galaxy clusters. So for example, we see the Perseus Pisces super galaxy cluster, the Leo super galaxy cluster. The one that comes the closest to matching our Laniakea super galaxy cluster is the one in Ursa Major. And what we see here is that, yes, we do have galaxy clusters sprung out along an arcing filament, but notice how big these clusters of galaxies are and how close together they are. And this is a place, again, where galaxies are jammed too tightly together, and there's just too many super giant black holes radiating deadly radiation. And so ours sticks out like a sore thumb. It's the only one where we see the galaxies and galaxy groups sprung out in such a way that there is no gravitational disturbance of any significance for the galaxies in the local group. And we've done it reasons to believe is actually create a map of the local group of galaxies. And what we've discovered, yes, there we go, is that we live in a galaxy group that's like none other in the universe. And in our universe, there are literally millions, billions of galaxy groups. But ours is the only one that doesn't contain a single giant galaxy. Ours is the only one that contains only two large galaxies. Most of them contain dozens of large galaxies. Ours has only two, the Andromeda Galaxy and the Milky Way Galaxy. It's also the only grouping of galaxies where the large galaxies are far apart. What we see in other galaxy groups is the large galaxies are about this far apart. What we see in our local group is that they're very far apart. This is all double scale. And also we see it has only a few large dwarf galaxies, only 5. And then it has several hundred tiny dwarf galaxies that don't show up in this particular image because of how faint they are. But because the Andromeda Galaxy is 2.5 million light years away, its gravity doesn't disturb the spiral structure of our Milky Way Galaxy. And because of the fact that the third biggest galaxy in the group, which is the Large Magellanic Cloud, which you see just below the Milky Way Galaxy, it's got just the right mass, just the right diameter, and just the right distance from our Milky Way Galaxy, that it actually acts as a funnel, pulling in these tiny dwarf galaxies into the core of our Milky Way Galaxy in such a way as to sustain the spiral structure. If spiral galaxies are not consuming on a regular basis tiny dwarf galaxies, the spiral structure collapses, and now the stars are too close together. So we refer to the large and small Magellanic Clouds as the dietitians for our Milky Way Galaxy. They ensure that our Milky Way Galaxy gets exactly the right diet to sustain the amazing spiral structure and to keep that structure stable. Now, just a few months ago, the Event Horizon Telescope team, people think that the James Webb Space Telescope is the most powerful telescope that we have. That's not the case. What radio astronomers have done is they've linked together about 20 radio telescopes around the world, and they're able to link them together in such a way as to create a telescope with the equivalent power of a 6,000 mile diameter telescope. And that's the only telescope in the world that's got the resolving power to actually detect and measure the event horizons of black holes. What is an event horizon? That's the distance from a black hole where nothing can escape. However, just outside the event horizon, any matter coming in towards the black hole gets converted into energy with 10 to 42% efficiency, which explains why we would expect that there would be a bright donut of light around the black hole. And we've only been able to image that for our Milky Way Galaxy, and it took 4 years of dedicated observations to come up with this map. But notice, you do see the event horizon, but this is really quite a fuzzy image. And the problem is, it's very faint. I need to move it along. Yes, thank you. There we go. That just got published a few months ago. It took 4 years of dedicated observations to develop this image. They're hoping to come up with a better image, but it'll probably take another 10 years. But the reason why this was so difficult to detect is that for the last couple of million years, our Milky Way Galaxy's supermassive black hole has been on a starvation diet. Most supermassive black holes are pulling in objects as big as moons and planets and stars and giant molecular clouds. Our Milky Way galaxy for the past 2 million years has been on a diet of tiny comets and tiny asteroids. And therefore, we don't see a lot of light around the event horizon of the black hole. But we do know that our black hole wasn't always that quiet, mainly because we see this image here, which shows two gigantic X-ray bubbles. And these bubbles are expanding. As we measure the expansion rate, it tells us about 2 million years ago, our supermassive black hole was pulling in an object about the size of a planet, and it generated deadly radiation. But that was 2 million years ago. For the last 2 million years, it's been on a starvation diet. And particularly the last 100,000 years, it's been on an exceptionally weak diet of matter being pulled in, basically just gas clouds, tiny gas clouds coming in. Consequently, during the past 100,000 years, our supermassive black hole has been so quiet that we've been able to develop global civilization and build up a population of billions. And just a few months ago, astronomers discovered that similarly, the supermassive black hole that's in the Andromeda galaxy is 35 times bigger than the supermassive black hole or Milky Way galaxy. And ordinarily, even though it's 2.5 billion light years away, that would be a problem for advanced life on planet Earth. But astronomers have discovered, just like our Milky Way galaxy has been on a starvation diet for the past couple of million years, likewise, the Andromeda galaxy, at least for the past 100,000 years, has likewise been on a starvation diet. And therefore, advanced life is possible on Earth. You say, well, if there was a creator, why would he create black holes? Well, it turns out if you don't have black holes in the universe, you're going to be missing 25% of the elements in the periodic table, including two elements that are crucial for we humans to exist. And these are elements that are only made when neutron stars merge together to make black holes. And when that happens, you generate about a quarter of the elements that are, well, half the elements that are heavier than iron. So that's where our uranium comes from, or thorium, or gold, or platinum. That's where our iodine comes from. And so if it wasn't for these black holes, there'd be no possibility for life. And one of the papers that I got published in a peer-reviewed journal was this one called Black Holes as Evidence of God's Care. Put that in any search engine, it will pop up, and you can read the whole paper for free. You can also read for free the reviews I got, because I drew 3 atheistic astrophysicists who reviewed my papers. One of them thought the paper was really good and said, I want this to get published. The other two were really disturbed about the God factor that I was mentioning and said, no, this paper needs to be rejected. But they gave me an opportunity to respond to the reviewers. And you can also see online my responses to the reviewers. And basically what happened is the paper got accepted for publication. And in that particular issue, my paper was first for a number of reads. In fact, it exceeds by a factor of 2. But let me finish this off with what I think is one of the most profound evidences we see for fine-tuning to make our redemption possible. And that has to do with our unique moon. I mean, we see moons all over the solar system. We're actually detecting moons outside of our solar system, but we're noticing these moons are always tiny relative to the mass of the planet. Our moon is more than 50 times bigger than any other known moon relative to the mass of its host planet. For example, our moon comes in at about 1.5% the mass of our planet, whereas what's typical is something like 0.01%. And that's because our moon formed like no other moon. Our solar system began with 5 rocky planets. There was Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars, and a planet Theia. Well, what happened early in the solar system's history, Theia and the Earth collided with one another, which caused the Earth to become more massive, but also created a debris cloud around the Earth that coalesced to form the moon. It explains why we have a relatively small planet orbited by a gigantic moon. But during the first 560 billion years of the existence of our solar system, what we noticed is that our sun was pouring out intense particle radiation, gamma ray radiation, X-ray radiation, and flaring activity that's 100,000 times greater than what is happening today. That takes you up to that little green dotted line. And the radiation coming out from the sun was so intense that it would have sputtered away all of Earth's water and all of Earth's atmosphere. What prevented that from happening was that the Earth at that time had a very strong magnetosphere, much stronger than we have today. However, as scientists studied this, they realized there's no way the Earth could have had that strong enough of a magnetosphere by itself. And they realized the answer was the moon. Now, this is how far apart the Earth and the Moon are right now. But this is how far apart the Earth and the Moon were 4 billion years ago. And because we need to advance the slides, thank you for reminding me of that. That's the Earth and the Moon right now, and this is where they were 4 billion years ago. And because the Moon and the Earth came about as a result of this collision, Earth began with a very hot core, and the Moon began with a very hot core. Both of them had a hot liquid iron core. And because of how close together the Earth and Moon were, the tidal interaction between the Earth and Moon was sufficient to circulate the liquid iron in both the core of the Moon and the core of the Earth. So both bodies had a magnetosphere, a strong magnetic field that generated a magnetosphere. And because of how close together they were, the magnetosphere coupled. And it was that coupled magnetosphere that prevented the particle radiation from the sun sputtering away all of our water and all of our atmosphere. And the authors of the research paper concluded their paper by saying, this is a habitability requirement. It is the most profound habitability requirement. The only way you can have life on a planet is if you have two planets colliding with one another, just like Theia and the Earth collided, where you get the formation of the Moon, where both of a hot interior core, and the Moon begins to spiral away from that planet, just like the Moon spirals away from the Earth. If it doesn't have all those features, there's no way that you're going to retain water and atmosphere on the planet. And years ago, when people were working on the planet formation model, they said, we got way too much design here. We need to redo the models in order to eliminate all this amazing design we're seeing here. They redid the models and they came up with even more design. This is all published in the British journal Nature, and Tim Elliott wrote an article saying, all this extra fine tuning is causing us philosophical disquiet. Well, now that this philosophical disquiet has raised exponentially and explains too why we see the history of life that we do on planet Earth, where for the first 560 million years there is no life. The solar radiation would have made that impossible. Microbes are much more tolerant to solar radiation, and explains why for the first 3 billion years of life history, all we have is microbes. The sun has to quiet down enough to make possible plants and animals, and then there's only a 100,000 year wide window where the sun's radiation is quiet enough where we human beings can exist. And then we astronomers have been scouring our galaxy trying to find a star that's luminosity stability is like the sun. Well, the top figure here basically shows you the luminosity stability of the sun. What you see at the bottom is a star out of the millions and tens of millions we've looked at that place a second. Our star, the sun, is 5 times more stable in its luminosity stability than the second best star we've been able to find. And if that weren't the case, none of you would be able to sit here together this morning. Again, as you walk out, do pick up our book, Always Be Ready. It's free. And remember nothing else from my talk today. I know I was a little technical here. Just remember this, a principle in Job and Psalms. The more we learn about nature, the more evidence we gain for the supernatural handiwork of God that makes possible the redemption of billions of human beings from their sin and evil. Thank you.
Thank you for watching that. I'm just going to do a quick review of the extra design features that you mentioned in the video. You mentioned the Laniakea super galaxy cluster that has empty spaces. And this little red dot here is our galaxy group. And this is our galaxy group here. This little thing at the top is Andromeda Galaxy, the Milky Way is at the bottom right. And these are the Magellanic Clouds that you mentioned. And they're far apart so that you don't get radiation from one galaxy affecting another one. And in the Milky Way galaxy, no other galaxy like it has been found in the entire universe. And all galaxies have a black hole in the core. And our galaxy has been relatively inactive. And this reduced time began about 2 million years ago, and then it was further reduced 100,000 years ago. And the Andromeda Galaxy also has had a period of reduced activity, which began about 100,000 years ago. All the planets in our solar system are needed for life to be possible. Over 5,000 planets outside of our system that have been found, but none of them are like any other planets in our system. The sun, the top figure is our sun. The second most stable one is below. And so you see we have an extremely stable sun. We need the 5 asteroid belts, comet and asteroid belts, because one is comets replace water that's lost from our atmosphere, and asteroids provide material for mining that our society needs. And this is the radiation of the sun in the past, and it is going to go up again in the future. So we're at the lowest point right now, this dotted line here. We need to have a moon that formed with magnetosphere at the beginning, so that the magnetism of the combined Earth and Moon was strong enough to stop that radiation from hitting the Earth. So that you were able to still have microbial life, but then at a certain point you get God created animals. So basically what Hugh Ross is saying in the video was that the universe is fine-tuned for a global high population, highly technical civilization. And more than 816 factors have been mentioned. Well, not mentioned, he only mentioned a few of them, but the probability that all this could occur naturally is extremely low. We shouldn't even be here. And the best explanation is that this fine-tuning was designed by an intelligent and personal God. And if you want to find more information, we have books at the back. And some of these books we have available and some we don't. So we're going to open it up now for a time of Q&A. Let's see if we can change the screen share here. Stop the sharing. Okay, so if anybody has any questions. Oh, and there's also coffee in the back and cookies for anyone that's interested.
Take a break now, maybe. Feel free to help yourself.
Yeah, well, we're going to take a break now, and we're going to join back in a few minutes for Q&A. Why don't we have people can sit down, and we'll do a Q&A with among us and also with the people that are online.
Those 6 days,
Okay.
I guess it's way to weigh the different, all the periods of resolution.
So whoever wants to ask a question, Bernard, do you want to be first?
I've got a couple of questions. You want me to ask them now?
Ask one, and then let's see if anybody else has anything, and then we know.
Okay. Well, one of the statements that Dr. Ross made was that black holes give us evidence of God's care. And I'd like to know how that is. How do the black holes give us evidence of God's care?
Well, he didn't go in great detail, but he did say that there's about 25% of the elements in a periodic table.
Almost
that are-
50.
Pardon?
Almost 50.
Well, 50 of the ones heavier than iron,
Yeah.
but 25 of the total percent are only produced when two neutron stars collide to form a black hole. So if you didn't have those neutron stars forming, if you didn't have the black holes, you wouldn't have, be missing 25% of the elements in the periodic table. And a lot of those are needed for life.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So anybody else have any questions?
That was a good question.
Go ahead.
So aren't the heavier elements created when a supernova collapses and explodes or whatever?
Well, I guess, yes, but maybe not all of them. It seems that, you know, I didn't know the whole history, but it seems that most of them are formed in the supernovas, but some require different kinds of collisions, you know, the neutron stars.
The key elements were created in supernova explosions like phosphorus, sulfur, oxygen, nitrogen. A lot of those elements were created in supernovas. The heavier elements that he was talking about in this requires neutron star collisions. And we only just discovered that.
Yeah,
This is all recent. This is all recent research.
Yeah.
It requires an incredible amount of pressure. So you have to have a lot of mass in order to fuse atoms to become larger atoms, heavier elements.
Well, it's interesting.
Like as an example, he mentioned thorium, uranium, and iodine. Now your body needs iodine, but you would never think that you need uranium and thorium. but you do need it because the planet has to have uranium and thorium in the core, so it can have a hot core, and that hot core is needed for the magnetic field to exist, and it's also needed for the for you to get volcanoes, because they have to erupt once in a while, and earthquakes. And I don't know if you are aware that you need earthquakes, you need volcanoes to replenish the soil that's lost from erosion.
Yes. And the nutrients that are.
And the nutrients that are released.
Yeah.
So if you didn't have any volcanoes or earthquakes, life would survive maybe for a while, but then all the nutrients would be gone, nothing would grow anymore.
Over the uranium thorium engine sometime.
Yeah.
Most people are unaware of it.
Bernard, do you have another question?
Yeah, one of the other things that he said is that the Milky Way, Milky Way has been on a starvation diet. I don't understand what he was talking about.
Well, it's just a way of expressing it that it has not been sucking in, because there's a black hole in the center of the Milky Way. Normally it would be sucking in, planets, stars, all sorts of material, but it has not been sucking in anything during the last a lot less during the last 2 million years. So that as it absorbs more stuff, it creates radiation on along the event horizon. So because it's been absorbing less material, there's less radiation, so we're safer, basically.
So yes, if you had the higher level of radiation, that would not sustain life.
That's right.
Yeah, okay. The other thing that puzzled me was that he said the Earth is relatively small, but it has a massive moon. And what was the significance of that? Do you understand that?
If you had a planet, like you have Jupiter, for example, it has about five or six moons around it.
Yeah.
The moons are very tiny compared to the size of Jupiter. So they don't have hardly any effect on Jupiter. But the size of our moon compared to our Earth is so big that the orbit of the moon affects actually the orbit of the Earth. It actually makes tides.
Yes, we know that, and we get the tides and everything.
But it also keeps the inclination of the Earth stable at 23.5 degrees.
Ah, okay, that's good.
And then he mentioned also at the beginning, because of the iron cores in the center of both the moon and the Earth, it doubled basically the strength of the magnetic field, so that it provided added protection from the radiation coming from the sun.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And the moon slowed the rotation of the Earth, or Earth rotated much faster.
At the beginning, when the moon first formed, our day was 10 hours long. And during
Okay.
the whole history of the Earth, it's not gone up to 24 hours.
It's continuing to move away. The moon's mass is about 25% of the Earth, which is extraordinary.
That much.
Also, when he mentioned that 1%, that's only the relative size.
That's the relative size. That's why I wanted to clarify that the actual mass of the moon is about 25% of the mass of the Earth. So
Oh,
it's
that makes a big difference.
supermassive moon compared to the Earth.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, it is, and that's why it has this profound. That's why the moon is so profound, and why it can do the things that it does. It's literally like another planet orbiting our planet, and that's why it stabilizes our orbits as much as it does.
So that's maybe why it can have an iron core.
That's right.
Just because it's massive enough.
Do you know if is a magnetic field on the moon still active?
That I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead.
It puzzles me. I appreciate the fact that when the universe was created, whatever, time had a beginning and space and matter and all this, but okay, before the universe was created, what would you consider to be the time that God existed on? Was there some sort of a time or two dimensions of time or no? If you say no time at all, well, then how can you do anything if there's no time?
Chris, you've asked me that same question, and I don't really know the answer.
Okay, if anybody knows the answer, I mean,
Well, space and time are
well, they're linked. Yeah, I know.
yeah, they're more than linked. They're almost kind of the same.
Right.
Yeah, in the early creation, they're not distinguishable even.
Not distinguishable.
Yeah, they're kind of like one thing. So, I mean, if I move my hand like this, I'm moving it through space, right?
Right.
I'm also moving it through time.
Right.
Yeah, so they're very linked.
I see.
Yeah, so if you have a transcendent God, he lives outside of space and time. He created space and time. So space and time are a created thing. They're not something that God lives in. He does not live. He doesn't even, I mean, he experienced time as Jesus, but he doesn't experience time. He's not somebody that lives in time.
Well, there is a possibility that there's two dimensions of time, and so
That-
God exists in this other dimension of time.
That may happen, but as soon as you apply time to God, then how far back does he go?
That, yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know.
he's outside of time. Time is an ingredient in the recipe of creation. So space and time are,
It's his construct.
yes, his construct. That is such an important thing to grasp. You can't even begin to move forward with a lot of the stuff without first getting that transcendent God outside of what we experience in space and time.
It's actually one of the strongest evidences for God, I think, because, you know, I'm reminded of that old story of the little kid talking to his mother and says, you know, so mommy, God made the world, right? Yeah, yeah. And he made everything that's in the world, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So he made the big things, he made the little things, yeah, 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 yeah. Well, what did he stand on when he made it?
Turtles, right?
Yeah, turtles. And so, but the notion or the concept that God had to have been outside of space-time in order to create space-time is a testimony to the necessity of his existence. If he was a part of space-time, how could he have created? So people get really caught on this when they go, oh, well, you know, where is God in the universe? Well, you don't understand. The universe exists because he created it. If it's the universe, if God is in the universe, he could not have created the universe.
And that's
So that's the whole outside part of it. I don't like the word extra dimensionality because
No.
even dimensions were a construct of God. You know, so he's not in another dimension. He's not in anything that we can understand. Period. But
Clarify,
what is really cool, sorry?
to clarify, you're saying God creates space and time, now he exists in and out of space and time, now correct?
yeah, you
He
can
can
move
move
into it.
in our space time
Okay.
existence, of course, we know that. And most notably, he did as when he came as the Messiah.
Right.
But when he acts in space and time, it's not that he's obligated to do so because he's part of it, it's because he can't. He's outside. So he can enter in without being part of it. Yeah.
So in a sense, you can tell any religion you hear of that's human invention cannot go beyond the grasp of the human mind, and so thinks only of whoever created the universe is within the universe. Only Christianity has God being existing outside of the universe.
And it's right in the first few words of the Bible. In the beginning. It's all the time, right? In the beginning. God created the heavens and the earth. All packaged up in that little verse, the whole thing that we're talking about here.
I think Omar has a hand up.
Yeah.
Hilmar,
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 7, it does say, no, we declare God's wisdom, a mystery that has been hidden and that God destined for our glory before time began. And so that's right in the Bible. It says, before time began, God was doing stuff. So,
thank you.
no problem.
Somebody had a question, and you did, Rudy.
Yeah, Hugh Ross mentioned the fact that before the creation of the universe, he already was working at a plan of redemption.
Yeah.
For man. And um, as I was in the house to come here, I said, it's kind of sad for me to go here today because Dr. Roberts, who was here, is no longer here because he is, where is Dr. Roberts now in terms of time and space? Is he outside of this sphere? If he is with God in his redemptive plan, how do we answer that?
My own opinion is that he's outside of our universe. That's where, to me, that's where heaven is. It's not within our universe. It's outside our universe.
No.
So he's outside of time and space right now, obviously.
I believe so. You know, whereas when we make time, they thought you go up in the sky, you go to heaven. But it's not. You have to actually exit the whole universe and go somewhere else, which we don't know exactly where that is. So I can't give you an answer.
There's other.
It was Paul. Paul, you know, was carried up to heaven and came back. But then he wasn't allowed to say what he saw.
There's this one gospel song which really doesn't make sense now. It says, when we've been there 10,000 years. Well, when we are, say, for example, Dr. Ross, when he's been there 10,000 years, he doesn't measure his existence in where he is right now in terms of years. So the song should never have been written.
But the song is trying to just compare 10,000 years compared to eternity. Still nothing.
The other thing to keep in mind is Hugh Ross has also mentioned many times, is he mentioned it tonight about the two creation model, how God created this universe, but we know that this universe is not the last note in God's symphony. There's going to be a new creation, and he talks very clearly about the new heaven and the new earth. And so our future is not on this planet or in this universe. Every physicist will tell you that this universe, left long enough, will be cold, dark, and empty of life. That's a fact, because the way nuclear fuels burn. So God never, ever intended this universe to be the final creation. There was always going to be a new creation with completely different physics than this universe. And that's what we call the new heaven and the new earth. And evidently, we're going to have something to do on that new earth, assuming that we qualify to be there. And that qualification is faith in Christ, of course. But I'm excited about that. The idea of being in heaven, in this eternal sort of bliss, strumming a harp or whatever we're going to do, to me is not very exciting. If I think about this universe, what God did for us, how important it is for us to be creators like He is, then that means we have a wonderful future to face after this life. This life is all there is, like Paul said, then we're the most pity. There is something else. And I don't think that something else is going to heaven when you die. That's part of it, but I think that's a transition before God completes his final creation of the new heavens and the new earth. He writes about that a lot of his books.
So Hugh Ross talks about long day creation. Each of the 6 days is millions of years, allowing for the fossil record and the different periods of paleontology. But in the Bible, it's in Genesis, it talks about guys like Adam living 900 years, Seth, not having a kid until he's like 131 years. Is this a different timeline than what we're living? Or is this, you know what I'm saying?
I do.
Because you go and you talk to, I was just telling Andrew, you talk to 5 different pastors about whether it's 6 24-hour days. These 5 different pastors, all belonging to a church I go to, have different answers. So I was just telling Andrew, like, I'm from the science background,
I'm still trying to wrap my head around the 900-year-old Adam. I was just seeing this book about that. And so, or do you think it's a different timeline?
So, Bruno, you want to handle that?
It's not a different timeline.
Huh?
When Adam was first created, his body was basically perfect, had no genetic defects. His DNA was completely perfect. So, of course, he's going to live a lot longer than we do. And he didn't eat any meat. He only ate plants. So, when you eat meat, you absorb heavy elements in your body. So when you're a meat eater, you can't live longer than 120 years. But, it doesn't matter to us because nobody lives that long anyways. But for Adam, because he was only eating vegetables, he didn't absorb any of those heavy elements. So that enabled him to live longer.
So
And then as you look at further down along in Genesis, the lifespan starts to reduce.
Yeah.
So something happened after the flood that caused our bodies to start deteriorating. And it could be because of a supernova that happened nearby the Earth, and so the radiation damaged our DNA, or it could be something else. We don't know exactly.
Well, it says in Genesis 6:1, the Bible says, after the flood, he doesn't give the precise reason, but my spirit will not be put with humans for such a long time, for they are only mortal flesh. In the future, their normal lifespan will be no more than 120 years.
Yeah. So
says
in a sense,
literally.
God
God said literally.
set that and plan in motion on purpose because He wanted to reduce the lifespan.
Yeah, because of sin.
Yeah.
If sin is allowed to live 900 years, can you imagine how powerful it would be? So that's the explanation I've heard. That
so
in order
that's-
to reduce sin, he reduced the lifespan of man after the flood to 120 years. Because in Noah's day, they were sinful. They were terribly sinful without any good redeeming
So
quality.
that's what my wife says too. It's because of sin that we got cut
Well,
short.
Yeah,
But
it's Genesis
Then
6:1.
before that, wouldn't they already have overpopulation? Or somewhere in Genesis, it says Adam's son, is it Seth, or didn't have a kid until he was like 130 years, so they
No,
don't.
older than
In
that.
130 years, he didn't have a kid, really? I don't get that part.
Well, no, he probably had kids, but they just didn't mention it.
Yeah, that's.
They only mentioned the important.
Okay, so
generation.
130 years, you had a lot of kids. Isn't there
Yes.
overpopulation back then?
Your chances of dying from being murdered were higher than anything else. That's where you go. And right in Genesis, you have Adam and Eve, they have the sons, and one murders the other right off the bat, giving that indication that murder was just rampant.
What, they killed each other's brothers?
Well,
Yeah, he was 105 years old when he had his first son.
Yeah. So what about the first 100 years? You had no
Well,
kids?
Well, I don't know. All these guys had children when they were like over 100. I don't know. But anyway. I
See,
mean,
that's why I asked, is it a different time?
no,
No,
No.
it was, no. There's other explanations.
Yeah.
And, none of these explanations may be completely satisfactory, but it's not a topic that's without comment in a number of Hugh's books. And other authors have written on this topic as well. Theologians have tackled this for centuries. What's up with these long timelines of humans early in the Bible? And a variety of explanations of it.
But your explanation is right. That genetically they weren't flawed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Over time, sin flawed the genes.
See, my premise for asking that question is, if I can't wrap my, like a lot of people say, well, who cares? Like my wife would say, who cares? Adam died. The reason why it matters to me is because if I can't figure it out scientifically in Genesis, then how am I
You
supposed
can't.
to, how am I supposed to
You can't
believe what
figure
goes on
every
in
little
the New
nuance
Testament?
of science that's in the Bible. Like why, when time stopped, when the sun stopped in the sky, right? I haven't found any reasonable scientific explanation for that one. I have found a lot of explanations of creation, beyond, like we were talking about, where there's a lot of explanations that Hugh Ross explains and everything, and that's why I like belonging to this, because I have a scientific background. But the Bible is not quantum physics. It's not written for quantum physicists. It's written for all people, for all ages, for all time. So you can't expect every friggin' answer for every little nuance of science. It's impossible.
yeah, the Bible didn't say there was a supernova about the time of the
Yeah.
flood. But But it is possible.
Well, so you can't expect that. And scientists I have scientific friends who expect a big a quantum definition of why this. I says, you can't, the Bible wasn't written for that purpose. It was written, as a moral book for history, so you gotta take it for what it is.
So how do we interpret what's written there? I don't get it.
So let me just make a comment. One of the things that Hugh says a lot is that this apparent conflict between science and the Bible is what reasons to believe exists to tackle. So the question is never shied away from in RTD. The idea that you should be able to reconcile science and the scriptures is something that we believe very strongly. Now, that reconciliation may be more or less satisfactory to an individual, depending on what their question is. But many people have been able to say, okay, that explanation scientifically accords with what I read in scripture, or that explanation of the scriptures accords well with what I see in science. And so that's how the two can come together. But there will always be that gray area where, we don't necessarily have an ironclad answer to the question. So
Because
I
man's
respect-
wisdom is not as
I respect
powerful
where
as
you're
God's
at.
wisdom.
Chief.
That's
I
what
think
she
it's-
said to me
it's important.
yesterday. My wife says, what, you think you can figure out God? You're an idiot.
Well,
so-
no, but that ultimately is that, and I've got a lot of questions to ask
We
God
don't
in
do
heaven. Like I'm gonna ask him, how do you account for the sun standing still? Like, in the sky when Joshua was doing the fight, right? Well, how the heck can you account for that scientifically? I mean, I've seen a number of explanations. One was, I think, from MIT, where they did this computer model that they gain milliseconds over some of the year, but there's not enough time from Joshua to now to really account for all that. So anyway, that's one thing you have to ask God, I mean, I don't know if there'll be a real scientific answer for that you and Don can accept. I don't know, right?
There was a supernova that would have been close enough that could have damaged the magnetic.
There you go.
shield.
The ozone layer
No,
and
not the ozone layer.
radiation?
We do have the atmosphere, the ozone layer, and the magnetic
Yeah.
shield. But that basically age because of radiation.
Right.
So if we were more protected, you get a good night's sleep, you wake up next day, you didn't age any.
We actually age because of shortening of telomeres in our
Yeah,
chromosomes.
yeah,
There's
that's,
a lot of
So it
research
has
on it.
nothing to do with radiation.
Yes, it does.
It
No.
does.
So
Okay.
we're working on trying to figure out how to stop that, and it appears that.
Can't.
That you can, exactly. So
You can?
it's interesting.
you mean I'm eating chocolate, black chocolate and
You're
wine for
starting-
nothing?
You're not eating
What
meat
is
for
in our chromosomes
Go ahead.
that are decreasing? You mentioned the word. What was-
telomeres.
Okay,
Telomeres.
telomeres, okay,
They're the
got it.
little
A lot of
protein,
radicals.
fibers that
Yeah.
pull the chromosomes apart when
Yeah.
when the parent separates into two daughter cells.
Okay, got you there.
And those
Okay.
telomeres are very important. That's where they connect.
Yeah, for
So
longevity.
anyway, let's see if
Can
you
you
have a
repeat what
question.
you just said?
That's wonderful.
Let me get,
Radiation is what causes the effect on telomeres. That causes aging. Because basically our cells don't divide properly as well when we're old as they did when we were young.
can I try to throw my 2 cents in to
Sure,
answer
go
Chief's
ahead.
question there? If you read all these books, or some of these books from Reasons to Believe, some of your questions will be answered. Maybe not all of them, some of one or two of them. At least you know how, atoms form. You can sort of know how the early Earth formed, from tonight, all the different fine tuning that God put in place in order for us to have a nice place to live. It gives you a bit of an answer. Then it's up to you to extrapolate and say, well, if God has answered this much of this many of my questions, at some point he's going to answer some more. And I just have to have faith that things are going to keep on growing the way they're going.
Exactly. Very good.
At a certain point, you have to say, well, I think God has proven himself to be reliable. I'm going to trust him the rest of the way. When you married your wife, you didn't know everything about her. You found out a little bit about her. You say, well, I think I trust her enough. I'm going to marry her. And then later you found out more information, you found out more about her. But you,
Apparently she
when you made
discovered
that decision at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
When you first decided to marry her, you didn't, you knew just enough to say, oh, I think I'm gonna trust my life with her. I'm gonna commit my life to her. But you didn't know everything about her. So the same with God. You won't know everything, you know, but you know that Jesus rose from the dead. You're convinced of that. He died for your sins.
And she's like most
I understand
people, they
90% of the
secret right to
Bible,
the end of
maybe.
time.
I don't understand the other 10%, but I'm gonna trust that things are gonna work out.
So can I ask you just one kind of a weird question? In the Bible, it's very clear that it's a small gateway to heaven. Through Romans says only through Jesus. And yet there's 7 billion people on this planet.
Yes.
And maybe 2 million Christians, or I don't know how many millions.
One
There's
in
a million.
seven.
Huh?
1 in 7.
Yes.
1 in 7 people?
1 in 7. Yeah, people.
1 billion Christians?
1 in 7. Yeah.
Yeah, so if there's 7 billion people, 1 billion Christians.
Really that many? Okay.
Yeah.
So my question is, do you think that this thing we call God is bigger than what is written in the Bible, meaning that a person who is Buddhist or a person who's Muslim might be allowed to be in the kingdom one day? That maybe this is written like what this gentleman was saying, for all people in parables, but in reality, God might be bigger, that he would let, because I have a lot of friends who are Muslims, Buddhists, Kunyam, all kinds of, and they're great people. And I can't believe that God will subject them all to hell.
I thank God every day that I'm not the judge.
That, you see my point?
But God has provided Jesus as the answer, even for those people. Those people are free to join in God's kingdom. They just have to accept Jesus.
Well, all I know is when I was a Buddhist monk for a couple of years in Thailand, right? And what we were taught, those guys taught us, and they're mostly non-white guys, that Jesus was the ultimate Bodhi. He was a greater Bodhi than the Buddha. I don't,
really?
self-sacrificing. Yeah, so I heard that, and I kept that in the back of my mind. And then 7 years later, I converted to Christianity. But I mean, it's not like these guys don't know about Jesus. I know a lot of Hindus who know the powerful works of Jesus, and why they don't convert is for tribal reasons. You know what I mean? And God even talks about that. Jesus talks about it. I've come to bring a sword between you and your mother. What he's saying, he says, look, don't let tribalism get in the way of your relationship with me, because that can happen. And I see a lot of Hindus, Buddhists who believe in Jesus, but the tribalism culture sort of stops them a little bit. But I think if they keep focusing on Jesus, he will bring them with him to heaven. I mean, I don't know, but I'm not going to take the chance by being a Buddhist still. I'm going to be a
Do you
Christian.
think there's enough time for the other 6 billion to convert? You see my point?
Well, they
I
don't have
We're
think
to,
running out of time,
I
right?
don't know if they have to convert necessarily. I'm just saying they have to believe in Jesus, and a lot of them do. So I leave it up to God, like you say, let God be the judge. I don't want to be the judge, but I know a lot of them, they phone me all the time. They say, Happy Christmas, Merry Christmas, with good old Jesus, and they believe in the power of Jesus. But for some reason, they don't seem to be able to convert for tribal reasons.
Yeah, but in here it says that doesn't count.
Well, I don't know, but I mean,
I think the big thing is like, are they rejecting God? That's the main prerequisite. Are they rejecting God? I don't believe. all this
I
God.
mean, it's up to them and God. Ultimately, I don't take the chance, but I know a lot. I see them every time I go back to Asia. We all talk about Jesus. They all talk about Jesus. They don't talk about Buddha. They don't talk about Kaliyama. They don't talk about their God. They talk about Jesus.
They've heard of Jesus.
I don't get it why they don't convert, but they don't. And so
They're afraid of being.
God knows the relationship they have with him. I can't.
Alan,
For me, sorry.
It's like you said, they're afraid of being rejected by the family.
That's
Of
it.
all some that is
Yes.
for them, it's the hardest thing,
Yes.
because they're gonna be excommunicated, be cut out of the father's will and so on.
Oh, yeah, that's a bad, if a Muslim leaves a family to go to Jesus, I mean, it's like a death threat for that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know, because I live with the Muslims. I mean, it's a tough issue.
The premise, I think the one thing I would say to you is that inherent in your question, a lot of people ask this question, is the notion that all people are pretty good. And so all people should have a chance to be with God, which is completely false. Most people are not good. Most people are selfish and evil, and they deserve to be separated from God. And that's part of the gospel.
Correct.
Jesus said, it was Jesus who said, the gate is narrow that leads to life, and the way is broad that leads to destruction. That's Jesus talking. And Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And no one can come to God except through me. Now that's a pretty radical statement. Either he's out of his mind, or it's true. And people have investigated Jesus' words for 2 millennia. And the answer is, yeah, he spoke the truth. So this idea that everybody should just all be, we should be one big happy family one day, flies in the face of history. Because history shows us that human beings are wicked. We're not good guys.
I'll make a confession here. My wife, when I married her, she's a Buddhist, I'm a Buddhist, right? I became a Christian. She knows the power of Jesus. She says, I'd rather be in hell with my mother than in heaven without her. That's how powerful culture is.
So she still says that.
She still says that. And she goes to the temple every Sunday. I go to my church every Sunday. And it's hard for me.
Your wife Asian?
Huh?
Your
Yeah,
wife
she's a
Asian?
Chinese Malaysian, and she's,
I'm from Malaysia.
are you from Malaysia? Where are you from?
Oh,
Oh, she's from all the Star North, but I met her in Kuala Lumpur.
so she still believes that.
Yeah, she's the power of Jesus every friggin' day, but she can't get her head around leaving her mother. This tribalism is so powerful. And the Muslim is even more powerful. I mean, it's a fun, and that's why he said in Luke 10, I think, I've come to bring a sword between myself and your mother. And it sounds like you want to kill your mother. No, he realizes the power of the tribe, and he wants, I am above that. You have to transcend this loyalty to the tribe, and you have to have your relationship with me. And that's what he's saying. And in the Middle East, that's powerful too. Like, when a Jew leaves the family, I mean, that's tough for them to become a Christian. One of my pastors was a Messianic Jew, and he was ostracized by his family for almost 15 years before they accepted him back in. This is tough. When you accept Jesus, this is a big price you pay. And my wife won't pay that price.
Not yet.
Not yet. And it's not going to be through me. It has to be through one of my Chinese Christian friends to work on her, because you know how it is. Sometimes the husband can't do that.
They
But
will
at the
listen.
same time, like the question that's like, okay, if Jesus, like when Jesus says that he is the way or the truth, like what does that mean? Like, does that mean that Jesus himself or the ideologies that he teaches? Because I feel like this question is like, at the end, in Revelation.
It means Jesus himself. You
Yeah,
have to accept him as the
Yeah, he
savior.
came down. He was God. He was
Let
God
her
for some
finish
of
the
it.
question.
Yeah.
Because like he talks about in Revelation, like when he is judging, he does not. Well, I don't particularly remember him saying, and if he does, I don't know how much that's remind me, but he says that, and we were actually talking about that earlier. Like he talks about the sheep and the goats, right? The good and the bad.
Mhm.
And he says, "Oh, you guys helped me. You guys were there when I was sick, when I didn't have food, when I wasn't clothed, and all that kind of stuff. And then the rest, which are the goats, you guys didn't do this." And so, and when you take that as an example, and I feel like that's what your question is in a way, where let's say somebody never heard of Jesus, but they were good, right? Let's not talk about right now, but back in the day where it was a lot more difficult to spread the word and people weren't aware. And so at that point, what happens to those people that were good but did not know Jesus?
They're not
Paul
good.
actually deals with that.
But here's the thing though, right? Like, let's say for instance, because in the Bible, there's an Old and the New Testament, right?
Yeah.
And we talk about God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, which in of its own is a whole mystery, right? And so Jesus came in the form of human beings, and he, showed us and taught us a lot of things. At the same time, who is God, right? Or who's Father, and what role does he play, and what happened, like. So when you say that it's a narrow road, perhaps maybe it's like the lifestyle that Jesus was teaching in all his parables, and the kind of life that we're supposed to lead in terms of being good, and not maybe particularly Jesus as a thing, because I feel like that just kind of oversimplifies who he is in a way. I don't know.
I think the narrow gateway means Jesus is the guide. And only through him, it's not his lifestyle, it's accepting him as the Son of God, the Savior. And so if you don't, you're on the out. And I got,
That's how I get it.
yeah,
So
Remember that
just, I want to address the one thing you raised there about, well, what about people that, before Jesus, for example, or what about whatever. So 2/3 of the New Testament was written by the Apostle Paul, and he expanded on a lot of things for us, thankfully. And one of the things he covers is this issue. So in the book of Romans, chapter 2, he talks specifically about what about people who, haven't heard. And the short answer, I mean, you can go read it for yourself. The short answer is that God is fair. He's fair. And so he's not a capricious God. He's not going to say, well, you didn't say the right words or do. That's not how God is. Clearly looks on the heart. But you mentioned about the sheep and the goats. That was only a very small part of Jesus' teaching. Jesus was basically saying it's not enough to just have faith in me. You have to demonstrate it as well. And other writers in the New Testament expanded on that, right? You have faith, you have works, that. But even Jesus, when he talked about the sheep and the goats, was not saying that, your future is dependent on whether you did these things or didn't do these things. He's saying, if you have faith in me, basically, which he'd already made clear, then I expect that you will also demonstrate it in your actions. So don't say you have faith in me and then not care for those that I love.
Yeah,
So it all goes together, you see. So it still comes back to Jesus at the end of the day. Jesus is not a concept. He is a historical figure, and he proved that he was God by rising from the dead. That's the most dramatic thing that's ever happened in the history of humanity. And it is the most important foundation of the Christian faith. Without the resurrection, it's all just a bunch of gobbledygook and philosophy. But the resurrection changed everything. And so that is a historical fact that you can verify. And so that's why the Christian faith stands on both faith as well as, facts, things that we can look up and we can examine and we can come to a reasonable conclusion just based on the evidence.
Yeah, and the book of
Both go together.
In the Hebrews, Paul wrote about the man of faith, by faith, Abraham, by faith, he goes through all the men of faith, and they never saw the Messiah, but by faith, they knew there was a Messiah Redeemer. Job had faith. He goes through the whole list of those guys, and from my experience, I traveled the world a lot. I don't know too many people who've never heard of Jesus. They've heard of him. Whether they accept him or know him a lot, they, like my wife, heard of him. My whole family over there has heard of him. They know who he is.
when you think of pre-Christian or pre-Jesus times, when you read the Psalms, you're reading David's words. And when I read the Psalms, I think David is being a Christian.
It wasn't.
But do you think David would not be accepted at the early gates?
But he had faith in the Messiah, right?
Like the things that he wrote.
Relationship with God that's existed since God made man.
Yeah.
And men and women. So that relationship's been possible. What happened from Jesus coming is that Jesus basically changed the ability of us to have a relationship with God and dramatically enhanced it in a way,
Well,
because
even
up until
also-
then, there was the notion that God would be resident in us was not, that's not the way the Jewish people experience God. They experience God in the Jewish nation as a whole, but not in individuals. Whereas in the New Testament, we understand that God, through Jesus, has now made it possible for the Holy Spirit to literally come and
Well,
be
he
in
wanted
each
a new
person.
covenant. The old covenant, he improved on the old covenant to the new covenant, but if you're of the old covenant, that doesn't exclude you from heaven. And even Paul again in Romans, I think chapter 1, he says, "For the heavens declare the glory of God. Man is without excuse." He says man is without excuse. I mean, when I was a little kid looking at the stars, I knew there was a God. I just, when the star, I lived in the country then, so you could see a lot of stars, and you saw the meteors, and, you say, holy mackerel, this was not by accident. So.
It's one of the core things that we talk about here at Reasons to Believe is that God has given us two primary revelations of himself. And it's actually in that DVD there. If you want to get it sometime, it's called Dual Revelation. And basically what he's saying is that God has shown himself to humankind through his creation, first and foremost, because everybody can see it. Everybody has access to that creation, wherever you are in the world. And then he's given us a special revelation called the Scriptures, both Old and New Testament as well, that gives us more information and understanding of who he is. And when you put the two together, you have a remarkable revelation of God, all that we need and more. And so it's not that they are equal or anything like that. It's just they're two aspects of God's revelation.
And my question to that is, what is the difference between God and Jesus?
Jesus was God.
Right, and that's what I'm saying.
Is God.
Before Jesus came to earth,
Yes.
he was there.
He existed.
He existed before, right?
Correct.
So people that didn't know Jesus before he came here, then they believe in Jesus in a way? No.
Jesus appears in the Old Testament several times actually,
But then
so-
your judgment.
but not in human form.
If you,
Sorry.
there's some.
And we're getting into some sort
Well,
of.
wasn't.
Right.
You're talking about
The judgment
burning
before
bush.
the Old Testament was different.
You said, gee,
No, there's other parts of this.
But then if you read Colossians, it says that Jesus was at the beginning and he's the one that created everything.
Yes.
No, he was the creator.
No, yeah, the Old
But then
Testament.
Genesis
is a
1, 2
different
says the
form of
Holy
judgment.
Spirit created everything.
It's-
So, you have God the Father, God the Son, and God the Spirit. All three were involved in the creation of the whole universe.
God said he's going to make humankind. What did he say? Let us.
Create human in our image and
Mankind in our
likeness.
So us
And
means
us,
there's
we
three of
are.
them. No, there's
That's
three
right.
of them.
And
There's
in
God the
Genesis
Father,
1,
God the Son,
when it
and the
says
Spirit.
God created. God is the word Elohim, which is plural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Elohim,
the
not
Trinity
Yahweh.
is there from the very beginning
Yeah.
and all the way through to the end of the scriptures.
And to your question too would be, because the Old Testament, they're different judging, right? It's the law. It's not like the Holy Spirit. Like God judges, right? He makes the decisions. If you made a mistake, then you're done. It was really scary on Old Testament. And I think the Lord Jesus, I think that the Holy Spirit is here with us because there's much grace, right? We are in the New Testament. We are people of the New Testament. But then, can I answer back to him on his question?
Don't ask me.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, number one, because he mentioned, we are created in the image and likeness of God. So we ourselves are the masterpiece of God. It can be seen through us. So in every human being that's existing right now, everyone is created in the image and likeness of God. So then in itself, they possess the truth of who we are in God is in their hearts, in their DNA already, because the one who created them is God, not any other. But then where you fall in race or in country or whatever background, that's his design as well. Now, I came from Roman Catholicism. Even my family, sadly, I'm receiving persecution when I was there. And then I've been sharing. It's one of culture, but then another thing, they know Jesus Christ. Roman Catholicism is a lot of Jesus, but then they worship Mama Mary.
Yeah.
And then they're calling me different religions, right? But then it didn't stop me from worshiping God and Jesus. And I believe it's the work of the Holy Spirit. So
number one, those people who don't believe God is a God of love. The character of God is love, absolute love. In his absolute character, he cannot go against his will. If my family will not believe in him, or the people that I've shared with too, and then they continue that way, because God is a God of love, he will not push himself against your will because he has given you free will. Because if God pushes himself against the will of that person, then that's not love. That is what? Your control. You're controlling the person, right? Let's say one of the examples is that you are a suitor of a certain woman, and then you love the woman, the woman doesn't love you, and then what do you do with your love for that woman? Well, will you, out of your overly love, just abduct the woman or whatnot, do something else? No, you love the woman, you let them go. So that's the love of God. That's your will. Sure, I let you be, because he's a loving God. That's his character. Right?
So you have to let him in, right?
Pardon me? Yeah.
Yeah, so.
But then there's another
He's not
thing
gonna
too.
bust the door down.
There's another thing too, my dear brothers and sisters in Christ. We cannot fathom with our brain the things about God. So he decides whether who gets saved or not. All we can do is to pray for them and for his mercies and grace for people to get saved. Because I don't want my family or my entire clan to go to hell, would we not, right? We want everyone to see the kingdom of God, to be there. That's why I'm so passionate in learning and sharing the gospel.
So wait, hang on a second. You got another question?
Go, go.
And
I'm
I'll
good,
add
I'm
on to that, I think it really makes some points. Or do you want to finish?
I'm done.
Okay, I think it's really good to point out the goodness and the love of grace of God. Like just that verse that says God desires even the wicked to be saved. He doesn't desire, the wicked to perish. I think we need to keep that in mind in this conversation.
Yes.
Like you're getting at. I'm also thinking about too, like I actually personally believe that God judges people based on their awareness. And I don't think general revelation is just simply enough. I mean, I can give a few different counterexamples. What do we do with babies? What do we do about the 5-year-old, the 10-year-old, the 12-year-old, the disabled, the 20-year-old? As we go up through this, there's so many different factors. As God is the just God, which has been attested so many times here, we have to take into account. And I think God is taking all these things into account.
Yeah, they call that accountability, right? And that's a big issue, and nobody really knows that answer completely. That's a good point.
Oh, sorry.
Good point.
I have another point to make too.
Go ahead.
Since Eve sinned, and then the sin was there, so genetically we were born with sin. So correct me if I'm wrong, our destination must be hell because of sin in our DNAs, correct? And then, but then by the grace of God, we're saved,
Depends
correct?
on your theological framework. Some Christians would agree with you and some would not.
I'd like to be, because I was thinking about that.
Because if sin is a thing
Mhm,
that we get physically,
yes,
then how can God judge us for something that we have no choice? But if sin
Makes
is a
sense.
choice and it's rooted in the selfishness of man's heart,
mhm.
then there is true guilt and there's true accountability. So that's important to make that distinction, I think. Personally, I do not believe sin is transferred physically.
Physically.
No, we inherit a physical challenge as humans, that's for sure. I'm biased towards sin. But there's nothing making us sin. Scriptures are very clear that we sin because we're selfish.
Oh,
And-
okay.
And we're
And
carried
we all-
by our own, our own selfish desires, James says.
I think we're saying
Nobody's born without sin, though. There's nobody born without sin.
Yeah, but
That selfish
hear me
desire is
out.
inherent.
I don't want to get into this right now. This is
We're getting deep.
This is
I
off
love
topic.
this.
This is almost Italian in nature, right? I mean,
You're
yeah,
talking about,
yeah, predestination and
we
all
can
that.
pick it
kind of
up
stuff.
private.
That gets kind of deep. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It needs like, what, 5 minutes?
But the key thing is that Christ has made an opportunity. That's, I think,
Amen.
the summary of all of this. Jesus has made it available to us. And to your point, we reject it. It's not a case of, we didn't hear, we didn't have enough information. No, it's that we reject that. No, now how that happens, what happens when we die and we face God and what decision he makes, that's not something that we can know. But the scriptures certainly make it clear that making a decision for Christ in this life is crucial.
I think we're gonna end it here so that the people that are on land that they can leave. And you guys can, we can all continue the discussion. We can stay here for another, 10, 15 minutes before they're gonna kick us out.
Oh,
All right, so, everybody online, we're gonna end the meeting here. So, well, thank you for coming, and check your email for the next meeting, information about the next meeting.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Can we be seen? Bye. See you again.